Yeah, so good morning. We're waiting for a few more people, but still we would start now. Welcome to the press conference. That is very short term, but Vladimir and me thought this is now the time to discuss this. As most of you know, probably from the media already, even the embargo on not only uranium, fuel, but also other Rosatom services has been demanded. It's not in the sixth package now, but it's being discussed. It was the French, but now I see also the German as EU member states started calling for it. We also wanted to see, also with this report, how come that gas, oil, and many other resources are being discussed, but uranium somehow got away. So there must be reasons for this, and I think we are getting close to this. At the same time, of course, there is a need to embargo this. This will be the topic that Vladimir Slivyak will discuss with us. Most of you know him. He's working for Eco-Defense Russia and also is a laureate of the Right Livelihood Award 2021. I'm Patricia Lorenz. I work at Friends of the Earth and many other organizations such as the Joint Project. And I prepared this report because I wanted to map out what are we actually discussing, how large is the dependence, because there's mostly the discussion of natural uranium, but this of course could be obviously bought from somewhere else but Russia, so there must be more to it. That's what the report tried to map out. Before we start, also I want to mention that this report was made possible by the funding of the Vienna Ombuds Office, the VUA. Still some are coming in, but I would start now my short presentation. And Vladimir will talk about also the security angle and everything else that comes to his mind on this topic after I made this overview over the report. I will try to share my screen now, always hoping the right thing comes up. Yes. So,
elnézést, nem haragudj, hogy ez megy közben, Judi.
Behaladsz itt tőlem?
Nem, hát
so sorry for those who are not now speaking. Please try to silent. Yes. Okay, so this is our press conference. I would like to present first the report, the Russian grip on EU nuclear power and the need for embargo.
Patricia, please switch to presentation mode.
Thank you. I switched. Yes. So what's been mostly discussed lately is, of course, Rosatom as the big nuclear holding. It was created by Vladimir Putin himself in the year 2007. And it's clearly not only about a holding which has 350 companies. So this means it covers basically everything which has to do with nuclear, from uranium mining. Over 60% of the enrichment capacity is needed for your conversion, design, and the famous Rosatom 12 company, which is delivering fuel for the VVER reactors. What I found really surprising, that they by now are also the only shareholder of Nucam, which I always, like many people, considered a German company delivering for storage and transport canisters also for many countries in Europe. What's less known is that Škoda Jaderné Strojírenství, the Czech company which is well known for all nuclear services, and also it has a TSO, not completely, but it owns 17% of the shares. So this means that Škoda is actually owned by Gazprom Bank, so it's fully in Russian hands. And they are responsible for a large part of maintenance in mainly CE, but not only CE countries. I have made here a list. It's, of course, Temelín in Dukovany in the Czech Republic. It's Mochovce, it's Bohunice in Slovakia, the 4 units in Pakš, and the 2 Kozloduy reactors in in Bulgaria, where they also, for example, exchange fuel, check the fuel, and look after the core configurations. So all this is absolutely key information, which they also, of course, are not readily going to hand over to another supplier of these services. Just quickly, the Czech government and ČEZ, the big utility, they see the problem very much like we do. They say Škoda is for us basically irreplaceable, and there have been major discussions how to solve this problem. They were discussing even nationalizing the company, but they are afraid of the political impacts and economic impacts when they in these times, of course, have to transfer that much money to Russia. Then the lot discussed issue is, of course, TREL. They supply the nuclear fuel for VVR reactors. This is well known. And there is two types of reactors. Basically, it's the smaller ones, the 440 and the 1000 VVR 1000 series. For the 1000 reactors, already since Temelin in the year 2000, Westinghouse started developing nuclear fuel to replace the TREL fuel. And Ukraine, I also described this in detail in the report. They tried to replace it, but there were technical problems for sure. There was the fuel rods were bending, which of course is a major safety issue, and other problems, but still it's not always clear what led most of the countries to switch back to TREL and some to switch back to Westinghouse. I also found interesting that not only there is at least two types of fuel, whereby the fuel for the 440 plants is not produced by anybody but TREL, that there is also for individual plants, there seems to be individual fuel. So the Loviisa plant in Finland received other fuel than Dukovany, for example, or Paks. Also after upgrades, there seems to be different fuel produced. And now that I mentioned Loviisa, I would say quickly, they had from 2001 to 2004, they also received Westinghouse fuel, but for some reasons they also switched back. It might be also simply cheaper. And even now in the crisis, they said they will continue receiving TREL fuel. Yeah, I think I said this already. We have these countries, Ukraine, Bulgaria, and Czech Republic, who are switching. As I said, Ukraine already has around half of its plants are supplied by Westinghouse fuel. Bulgaria has only 2 units, which is Kozloduy 5 and 6. And they are already trying for the last 3 years. They're preparing this switch, and it will work once the regulator has approved this new fuel type. But we also see, and this is one of the results from the studies, that it really takes a long time to develop the fuel and to approve the fuel. And we also have to think that, of course, Westinghouse is aware that there will be even more demand for its fuel, but they don't have the capacity and would have to restructure. So this is one of the key points. I found that short term, it's really hard to switch. Here is an overview, although I mentioned the many already. It's 16 EU plants that are VVR, and in Ukraine it's 15. Yeah, this is an overview, also well known by now, but we have here 2020 on the natural uranium production, 15% came directly from Rosatom, or its many uranium producing companies. And 23% it's here from Kazatomprom. They already came out quickly and said, we are not Russian, you cannot boycott us. But besides being a political ally, of course, of Russia, it's also a factor that many of the Kazakh mines are co-owned by Uranium One, for example, which is again a Rosatom company. Yeah, and this is also a finding that many countries, I found it also in the Czech state energy concept. They like to claim that nuclear is, of course, a domestic source, and therefore it's very, very important for energy security. Many lobbyists are doing this right now in the crisis. They say the answer to the problem with Russian deliveries is going for more nuclear, but there's a very simple sentence: Europe has no uranium production. So this is a fact. I mean, the last uranium mine was closed in 2017. And then I found interesting there were projects, the one in Greenland and in Spain. I mean, in Spain, look, they would start producing uranium, but both projects were canceled in the last year. The uranium production also is a very long-term thing. So there are, of course, mines, mainly Canada and Australia and so on. And they, of course, are considering increasing their productions. Even the US is thinking about going back to producing more uranium with all the ecological problem, regulatory problem, licensing problem. So to get to increase production is also certainly not short term. This is about years, if it ever happens at all. And these companies, also enrichment and conversion, which the report is covering, they need long-term contracts because their investment, the lead times are long, as I said already, and they need long-term contracts. A uranium mine is just not an on-off thing. And they already made clear that they are worried about long-term, because once the war stops, countries might switch back to the cheaper Russian uranium. This also could be a calculation that, for example, Slovakia and Hungary are both also having in mind that the war might stop and they might go back to simply importing the 12 fuel for the reactors, because for Slovakia, all of its reactors and the so-called new ones to come online soon, and for Hungary, all of their reactors are there for 40 reactors, and half of the Czech nuclear output, of course. So they might simply sit and hope and wait that the war is over. But I think many economists are saying there will be a kind of ice age. So the economic relations will not jump back out of nothing and we go on as before. So it's unclear how, but I think they have no idea how to continue. Slovakia is not even claiming they would have been trying to find another supplier, while the Czech Republic already proudly presented, I think just a few weeks ago, if not days, that they will have Westinghouse and Framatome fuel for Temelín. Dukovany, they are very silent, and how big the problem is, we saw in a few days of when the invasion in Ukraine, after it had happened, when all these countries had deliveries in spite of the airplane ban, they still had deliveries of nuclear fuels. So it was so urgent. For Slovakia, there is a calculation that what they received now might last only for 1 year. So for them, it's a very serious problem. And the rest, then I wondered whether they might replace, of course, also the new build plans they are having. As we know, Finland already yesterday canceled the Russian reactor they had ordered, Hanhikivi, which is 1,200 megawatt. But of course, Hungary has so-called under construction. I think there's not that much, and it's 5 years late at least, going on for its PAC site as units 5 and 6, and they also try to wait and see, it looks like. But for Dukovany, already last year was decided that they wouldn't go for a Chinese or Russian reactor, and that there are other possibilities. A quick overview shows that there is the EPR, of course, from EDF in France, but they have not only, as we know, the classic cost overruns, they also have, it looks like, serious design deficiencies, which became also visible at Taishan. And the other topic is that if they resolve this at all, that, as we know, the French president already announced he would want to have built 8 reactors for France. But when we look at the output of the past years, which was like 4 reactors in 15 years, and none is really completed, I don't think that there is so much capacity for real big export I found also interesting the AP1000, which Westinghouse is now trying to sell also, for example, to Bulgaria or the Czech Republic. There also are design problems, but also it has passive safety features. And this means that the regulators would have to license this. And for example, I talked to a Bulgarian expert and they said they wouldn't even have the capacity and the know-how to quickly license such a reactor. And the unsolved issue is certainly the issue of that this is a modular reactor. So how we are supposed to imagine that whole big component, it's a big reactor, not a small one, would be transported from the US to Bulgaria. So this is not really an easy one either. And then there is the South Korean reactor, the APR 1400, which was only built in the United Arab Emirates, and no one else ordered it ever since. And it looks it's not recognized fully as a generation 3+ reactor, thus it might not really be a hit in Europe either. And my last remark is that the Chinese reactors were already excluded last year in the Czech Republic, and the UK basically all said they don't want to risk this security problem by having Chinese infrastructure influence. I would finish at this point. And I think we would continue with you, Vladimir, right away and have space for questions later. Please.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Well, first of all, as a Russian citizen, I want to say that war in Ukraine should be stopped immediately. I also, in the very beginning, I want to say that we launched together, my organization, together with German group Urgewalt, we launched a few weeks ago a website called Defuel Russia's War that collect information about involvement of Western companies with Russia or in Russia. And if you're interested about how big is the dependence of European energy business on Russia, well, you can go on this website and get this knowledge basically. Well, it's been a lot of talks in the last few weeks in Europe how to cut dependence on the Russian fuels, and a lot of people talking about fossil fuel, but there was almost no discussion about cutting dependence on the nuclear fuel and services from Russia. And just to give you an idea what we're talking about, it's about 46% of gas came to the EU from Russia. It's approximately the same amount of hard coal that came from Russia, and about 27% of oil that came from Russia. But there is also nuclear fuel, and now people finally starting to talk about embargo. And I think the report that was produced by Friends of the Earth Austria is very important in this regard, because it gives a very good picture of what it means, embargo on nuclear fuel, and how is it possible to reach or impossible to reach. About nuclear fuel, for example, in the year 2020, it was about 2,500 metric tons of uranium imported to the EU from Russia. But that's not the only dependence on Russia. In nuclear industry, there is few things that nuclear industry, the Rosatom, was doing in the last few decades to create this dependence we're talking about. First of all, it's of course the construction of new reactors in Europe and for Europe, because I should remind you that when it comes to new nuclear power plants, it's not only Finland that already canceled project, and not only Hungary Hungary that still wants to build nuclear reactors, and so far they don't want to cancel this project, and there must be obviously a pressure from the European Union for Hungary to finally cancel this project. But there was also another type of dependence that Rosatom was trying to create, and that was about building new nuclear reactors not in the European Union, but on the border with European Union. They successfully exported electricity from old Leningrad nuclear power plant with Chernobyl-type reactors to Finland for many years. And I should remind that even if Finland canceled a new project, they didn't cancel import of electricity from Russia. It still exists. Back in 2009, Russia decided to build nuclear reactors in Kaliningrad region on the border with Lithuania. The interesting thing about this project was that shortly before, in this region, there was a new gas power plant coming online that would be not only covering the whole demand of a region, but could also export some energy to neighboring countries, and it's still doing until today. And when a new nuclear power plant was announced there with two big reactors, 1200 megawatt each, that was pretty clear that it's not for the need of this region, it's only for export to neighboring countries. And that was obviously created, the whole project appeared as a attempt to create an instrument of a big influence on Lithuania and Poland if they would agree to import this energy. Fortunately, because of political issues and because of a protest and resistance from environmental groups in Russia and Europe, this project was canceled. But then Rosatom started another project on the border with European Union, which was in Belarus. And then they tried one more time in Belarus because Belarus didn't need two reactors. And Rosatom decided to, Belarus didn't even use the capacity of one reactor, didn't need it. So the building two reactors there was obviously only for export and again, creating dependence on Russian energy, first of all in the Baltic states, but also they were talking about pumping this energy into European grid. And another thing that where Rosatom was actively trying to be involved in the European market is, of course, with fuel. I mean, we know that for a very long time, Rosatom was for many reactors in Eastern Europe. It was and it is the only supplier. But they also been trying to get involved in the production of nuclear fuel for Western European reactors. And that, because of the Ukrainian war, this plan was canceled, but that was an agenda for a few years, a joint nuclear fuel venture between Framatome and Rosatom in the German city of Lingen, where we've been organizing a lot of protests last January, demanding from German government to stop this joint venture, arguing that if there is a nuclear phase out in Germany, then it has to be stopped as well, not only reactors. Of course, it's very bad that war started, but it's very good that this project was canceled finally. It's interesting that when Europeans are discussing embargo on fossil fuel, and now a discussion started about nuclear fuel, everybody talks about like how Europe can cut this dependence, how Europe can stop, and no one really discussing what will happen if Russia stops it. And that's very interesting thing. I mean, like, why everybody in Europe actually talking about it like, that it's them who decide how long this export of fuels from Russia will exist. I mean, and no one talks about what would happen to those nuclear reactors, to the industry that imports fossil fuel. And I find it quite interesting, you know, and there is obviously no plan for this if Russia would immediately stop, you know, if Russia itself would introduce embargo on the Russian fuel for Europe. And I mean, it's important also for the whole picture to point out that there was the time, and quite a lot of time, to lower this dependence on the Russian fuel, especially after annexation of Crimea in 2014. Well, at least in Germany, but also in Europe. There was a new rules coming in place talking about, you know, diversifying your sources of fuel and all that kind of stuff. And that was clearly focused on, well, opportunities to replace Russia, or at least buy less fuel from Russia and find other sources. But those rules were basically not implemented, and a lot of countries, especially those dependent on the nuclear fuel in Eastern Europe, they didn't really do anything to, well, to replace Russian fuel or somehow buy smaller amount of those fuel. And well, now, because of the decisions in the past, this difficult situation was created. And well, obviously, the result of the past action or non-action in this field bring us to the point where let's make it very clear, in the next few years, it's impossible for some countries or for some nuclear power plants, it will be impossible to replace a nuclear fuel from Russia. And I mean, well, Eastern Europe, VVER 440 reactors, I mean, all of them are pretty old reactors. And even if there would be alternative supplier, it will take quite a long time for the supplier to create the fuel for those reactors. So obviously, if we're talking today about embargo on the Russian nuclear fuel, that means shutting down old reactors, well, at least VVER 440 reactors around Europe. Basically, and that needs to be understood very clear, that we are talking basically, that embargo basically means shutting down old reactors. And I think, I mean, the last thing I wanted to say is that from my point of view, European Union should really put a lot of effort into creating a plan, how to a plan for this anti-nuclear embargo, which means coming up with a plan how to quickly replace the energy coming from the old Soviet nuclear reactors or VVER 440 type. And because those reactors needs to be closed down also for security reasons, for safety reasons, I'm sorry. So my idea and my opinion is clearly that, I mean, embargo is needed, because as long as all this big money paid from Europe to Russia for the fuel, this money will be used for the war in Ukraine. And well, if we're talking about cutting out finances needed for Vladimir Putin regime to continue this war, then we're talking about embargo, and embargo means shutting down old reactors of a Soviet design in Europe. And that means there must be a very clear plan on the side of the EU how to replace energy that produced by those nuclear reactors today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vladimir. I think it was extremely clear, and I dare add something, although it seems not necessary. But as Vladimir really said, I have to defend the European Union on this. The European Supply Agency, which usually seems rather useless, they put out reports on uranium, no one cares for them. They said in both the annual reports, 2019, 2020, you have to diversify. You cannot be dependent on the Russian fuel. And there was even earlier, it's in the report 2017 or 2015, as early as that the European Commission even financed a fuel program to develop fuel, the 440 fuel with Westinghouse. What came out of it must be nothing, or the stuff that was used 3 years in Loviisa and no one knows why they stopped using it. It could be as simple as money, it could be other items, but I think the issue that they also could stop, and what Slovakia, because for Slovakia 50% of their power comes from those mentioned reactors. Also Hungary, in the Czech Republic, I would guess it's around a quarter, because they have half, and half of this is the VVR 1000 in Temelin. So it's really a lot. And I think we see now already how Slovakia is trying to avoid, of course, further embargoes from the European Union side. So this kind of blackmail might increase even further. And there is a complete silence, as I said. They just don't comment on how they would place it. And they only said that the Slovak government said they are proud how they managed to get this last delivery, how they outsmarted everyone. I mean, this I have to admit, I find it rather disgusting, but the Hungarians don't even talk about it. But as Vladimir said, Russia could, of course, say, we stop it unless you stop other stuff. So we are really in a very difficult situation there. I think his suggestion that the European Union and the neighboring countries would have to find a plan how to offer Slovakia at least a short-term supply, and Hungary as well, could be a very, very important point we would have to raise. Okay, are there more questions, please?
I mean, Patricia, let me just add one thing.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's not. I mean, probably not everyone who listening now is well, maybe sharing my anti-nuclear stance, and people might really think like, well, suggesting to shut down 14 actually operating today VVR 440 reactors in the European Union. That's a lot. I mean, really. I mean, I'm not kind of person that thinking it's very easy to shut down 14 reactors and find a replacement for its energy. But and I understand it sounds like close to impossible to people who are not knowledgeable about this field. But I should remind that it's not the first time when there is initiative to shut down big number of reactors in a few countries, let's say. There was an experience with Chernobyl type reactors like this back in the 90s. Actually it was, I think it was Europe who was asking basically all those countries that having Chernobyl type reactors to shut them down as soon as possible, and they were actually providing financial support for this. So I mean, if such thing like shutting down this VVR 440 14 operational reactors, if such decision or recommendation would be made on the side of European Union or European Commission, I mean, there was an example in the past when a big number of there was a proposal to close down big number of reactor. So it's not something like that never happened before or something like that. So I think it is quite realistic, but if we are serious about embargo, you know, the question is how much we want to cut dependence of Europe on Russian fuel. That's the main question. The main question is not how hard is it to shut down reactors. It's hard, but it's possible. You know, the question is how much we want it.
Yes, so I may add that what you mentioned was not only the RBMK reactors, but also the first generation of the 440. So it was even more reactors. This was Slovakia, Bulgaria, and Lithuania, and they're still receiving money. And with this money, they were actually supposed to build up other alternative sources, which they rather skipped, but the decommissioning is going on. So I can only support this. Yes, it was a decision, it was a requirement for EU access of these countries, which we negotiated with the Helsinki summit in 2019. So 1999. I'm also okay. Do we have questions now that we stopped talking? Everyone fell asleep? I don't think so. It was
Yeah,
very interesting. Hi, Limon.
I have a question. Can you hear me? I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, thank you very much. It was very interesting, both presentations, and yeah, it's I'll be very open, and indeed, Vladimir, you pointed out extremely clear what it's one side what they talk, the officials, and the other side what can be done. And I can give example from my own country, Romania, where officials are very bravely saying that we are going to replace and to explore, for example, new sources in Black Sea. But that is easy on paper. Of course, it's not that easy in terms of technology. The question is, because it's mentioned about Westinghouse, and back in 2015, we assisted in Craiova at public debate, so-called public debate, pointed out about a new reactor, third generation, in cooperation with Westinghouse, unit number 7 in Bulgaria. And indeed, we are very surprised, badly surprised, but because in terms of safety, they didn't say so many things. And as far as I know, I've been to Bulgaria also about this discussion, and there was quite a strong opposition from Vienna as well, and from Germany, I suppose, and also from Romania related to this cooperation with Westinghouse. And we find out that later they have quite a few problems related to designing of this new type of reactor. So I don't understand how they will deal with replacing fuels and adapting the technology for all reactors like in Bulgaria. And it was mentioned about reactors 5 and 6. And I think it's already known that these reactors are already extended for another 30 years, the lifespan. And they are illegal because the ESPO convention was not respected. So Romania.
What is your question, Luminita? Just to get to the question.
Yeah, the question is how Westinghouse, because it was mentioned that Westinghouse would be the new promoter for adapting the technology to provide fuels for the reactors in Europe that are working with fuel from Russia. So I think it's not, so how do you, can you explain more how they can do that? Because I mentioned Westinghouse, as far as we know, was not so, welcome.
Yeah, no, as I said earlier, so for the VVR 440s, there is no Westinghouse fuel. As I said, it was only for 3 years, but somehow after 2004, nobody ordered it anymore, whatever the reason might be. With the fuel for the VVR 1000 units, and Westinghouse, the first time they developed it was in the year 2000 for Temelin, because they also finished this VVR. So it was an East-West cooperation, and the Czechs insisted, for the reasons we are in now, to have a Western fuel supply. But there was trouble with the first fuel deliveries in the reactors. There were technical reasons, the grid instabilities, rods were unstable, and so on. So they switched back to 12. And the Ukraine insisted more. And now, as I said, they have about half of their reactors supplied by Westinghouse fuel, but there they also switched back and forth. So there are technical problems with the fuel. But now, at least officially, it seems to be working. And one has to say that in the Ukrainian reactors, they have experience with this Westinghouse fuel. And as far as we can tell, it does work. Another thing is, of course, design deficiencies, which I mentioned, problems with the AP1000. That's, of course, not fuel, that's a reactor design.
But what about Bulgaria, the two reactors in Bulgaria?
Yeah, these are VVR 1000s. And for those reactors, 2 or 3 years ago, the Bulgarian operator tried to order Westinghouse fuel, and it was now obviously designed. And they have to hand in this Westinghouse design so that the Bulgarian regulator can give it a license, and then only it can be, of course, loaded into these reactors. And this will take 2 or 3 more years. So all these are really lengthy issues. Yes.
Because I'm sorry to insist, there are quite a lot of problems, technical problems actually now with these two reactors. In 2019, for example, the reactor 5 and 6 stopped unplanned, then in an emergency situation for 5 times. So between August 2019 and December 2019, 5 times they stopped on emergency because of failure.
Okay.
Failure of electricity, failure of different parts, components. So it's quite dangerous trying to adapt also the technology related to
Absolutely. Yes, of course, it's always a new problem. Do we have more issues someone would like to raise or questions before we finish here? Yes. P. Becker, you wanted to...
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for those presentations. Can you hear me clearly? Thank you. Yeah, it's maybe more of a kind of request. I'm from South Africa. I've been a long-time anti-nuclear activist. I was recently on the regulator board before I was fired, another long story. But my main concern and my interest in this is that we have a research reactor, a small-scale reactor here in the country that's coming to the end of its life. And the plan is to replace it very soon. In fact, RFIs are out at the moment, requests for information to get information about replacing it. And one of the forerunners is Rosatom for that process. And in fact, recently in March, Rosatom presented, I think they've got a subsidiary here, or at least an office here in South Africa. They presented and they're going to pitch for that. And I've been trying to draw attention to this. I'm also an anti-nuclear activist, like Vladimir, cards on the table. But purely from an economic point of view, I don't think it makes sense to engage with a company which might have consequences in terms of sanctions and lack of availability for support and spare parts and so on. And in addition to that, there's also the plan to procure a new 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power in South Africa. The minister has committed to doing that by 2024. And again, Rosatom is one of the front runners, being one of the more affordable ones. So I'm trying to raise awareness of that. And I guess my request is to put that on the international radar, and trying to, any assistance with getting more awareness of that would be great. I had a look at that website that Vladimir mentioned, and it doesn't seem to talk about reactors specifically, more on fuel. So I'd like to sort of raise that, and I'd love to write an op-ed or some kind of article about it, and I'd be very interested in collaborating with somebody to do that who could add their skills to my small skills in that area. Thank you.
Vladimir, I think this is more a request to you, or...
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I mean, I've spent a lot of time working with South African groups, and we stopped there the first plan of Rosatom, which was huge, with 8 nuclear reactors and other elements of nuclear infrastructure. And I think that what is real threat also is that Rosatom could supply floating nuclear reactors. And that's another concern right now, because I mean, there is a bit different fuel used, and it's highly enriched fuel for those small reactors, which I actually think that, well, as long as Hungary keeps on their project with Rosatom, well, we should conclude that even in Europe, it's still possible for reactor or for a Rosatom to build something or to supply something. I mean, there is no embargo, and as we heard today, it will be very difficult to really achieve this embargo if we're talking about short period of time. But I mean, definitely, I mean, get in touch with me. Maybe we can try to, I don't know, do something about South African situation. I mean, I'm open to this.
Thank you. Anything else for now? Okay, so then thank you very much for your attention. I think you have emails to both of us, so if you have any more questions later, please contact us. And Gabi, I saw already put into the chat where you can find the executive summary, the report, and also later the recording of this presentation, and our website, don'tnukethetaxonomy.eu, because we also connected, of course, to the taxonomy, since this complementary delegated act, which is now for decision in the European Parliament, is a complete different thing than it was when they pushed it into the taxonomy discussion, certain member states, because as you know, this is only suggesting to include gas and nuclear energy into the taxonomy for the reason of energy security. So which both is gone at this point. So therefore we also invited members of the European Parliament, and we will send them our information. The decision they should take in July. So let's see whether they will refuse to accept this idea from the European Commission to add gas and nuclear. Before I turn it off, I look at those. Yeah, okay, so everyone is happy, everyone knows everything. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.